Oh, there you are. I was hoping you'd make it. Come in, sit down. Welcome to the Story Well. If you've found your way here, then here is where you belong. In this place, we welcome storytellers of any stripe, whether published or anonymous, budding newbie or seasoned veteran, via prose or stage direction or panel descriptions, through the corridors of your memory or to worlds you've only imagined. You are among your own people. But now it's time to leave the word mines, step back from the writer's block, and put your story on pause. Set down your pen, rest your weary wrists, lay aside your stylus, pull up a seat at the table with your fellow wordsmiths as we discuss the art and craft of story. Joining me at the table is Mr. Ryan Dalton, novelist, podcaster, storyteller, raconteur. Any other titles I need to?
No, just make stuff up. It's okay.
Pilot, sword fighter,
juggler,
possibly Batman,
sword juggler,
right?
Yeah, all those sound good.
So you are a published novelist.
I am.
So that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because you're not only a writer, but you are actually a working writer.
Yes,
true. I have a lot of respect for everybody who's out there struggling and trying to get their stuff out there. But I know for a fact that you have put pen to paper and actually have gotten money in exchange for words.
Yes, that's actually, I always called myself a writer. Yeah. And I only apply this to myself. I don't enforce this for anybody else, of course. Sure. But I always called myself a writer. I called myself an author when I got paid to do it. Yeah, when I sold my first book, I was like, okay, now I'll tell people I'm an author. Ironically, I usually still just say writer. Yeah. But in my own head, I'm like, yeah, author.
So I guess the topic on the table in front of us today is plots or plants. So what we're going to talk about is essentially how do you go about planning your story as you're writing it, or do you just not do that? Now, this could apply to anything. It could apply to a novel or a play or whatever it is. Probably not a video game because video games are intentionally open-ended, but is it better or in your experience? And then we're going to talk about it. We're not going to come up with an answer at the end of this.
Yeah, it's very subjective, but it's
right,
fun
exactly.
To talk about.
It's just through both of us what has worked for us, what hasn't worked for us, what advice have we gotten in the past, what bad advice have we gotten in the two fields. Because I always think of the two sort of Mount Rushmores for each of those things are Neil Gaiman is a pantser. So basically that means that he has some ideas about where he wants to go, and then he just lets it rip.
Yeah, he sits down at the keyboard and just goes.
He knows the characters, he knows sort of the world, and then he has no idea what the story is going to go, and he just lets it happen. As opposed to George R.R. Martin, who knows every little bit along the way, and he's inching the stuff along bit by bit to get closer to his ultimate goal along the way. I know there are other people on there, but those are when I think of the two, that's what I think. And
they're recognizable.
Yeah, exactly. And I end up somewhere in the middle. So where do you sort of fall? Are you sort of more one way or the other? Like you get the idea. So we'll talk about that another time, like the idea thing. But you have the idea. Like, all right, I'm going to say now is the next step for you plotting out beginning, middle, and end?
I'm very much. I think most people are some hybrid of both. It's just like it's a sliding scale, of oftentimes. I think there are very few people who are solely plotters and very few people who are solely. Actually, I think there's probably more people who are solely pantsers than there are people who are solely plotters. I think as the scale slides closer to plotter, I think it becomes a little more rare to find someone who is a pure plotter, plans everything. Yeah, they're out there, but so I would say for me, I'm where I plot a lot.
Okay.
It sounded like a Dr. Seuss, like where I plot. I plot a lot.
I plot a lot.
But there's other things that I'm a little more freeform about it. Sometimes it depends on what I'm writing. If it's a shorter piece, like if it's just a short story I'm doing just as a thing, then I will kind of just let myself go, make it a little more freeing, and I'll start with, the basic concept and basic character, know where I want to end up, and then I'll just go and see where I end up. I use a lot of times short stories just to try something new, or like as a palate cleanser between longer things or things. So that's my time to just, I don't have to plan as much.
So for a short story like that, do you obviously usually I'd say in my experience, at least for a short story, you've had like, this is a beat, like, oh, this is, and then the vampire kills him or whatever it is. And then you sort of work backwards. Do you think about, before and after, and then just go, all right, I'm just going to cut to just this piece, or in a short story context, when you know that's what it's going to be, because sometimes we don't know what the idea is going to be when you have it. Do you think about like, all right, I could do all this stuff, or I'm just going to start from here and end it here? But in your head, do you have the other parts too, or are you just like, he walks into a room, he doesn't walk out of the room?
Well, for a short story, I'll tell you a trap I see a lot of short people who are trying to do short stories will fall into. They will give you a sliver of a larger story. Yeah. But it feels like a sliver of a larger story. I think the trick to a good short story is that you give someone a complete story, but you can still tell it's part of a larger world. But within that story, it is a contained story. I think that's where you can, especially newer writers, can fall into the short story trap of essentially they end up just giving you some scenes that are kind of plucked out of what would be a larger story. Okay. But to me, that's not how you should write a short story, unless it's going to be an anthology or something like that. But if it's going to be one self-contained short story, it needs to feel like a beginning, middle, end, just like there would be in a novel. So you need to be able, at least for me, I need to be able to say, okay, I'm going to start here. And, I do the beats, whether I'm plotting it or just kind of going through it, just like I would a full novel. And so I want to make sure that I'm very, very efficient with the things I'm telling you at the beginning to set up the worlds and the characters. And so that at least within this little microcosm, I am giving you a full story as if this were a novel. Okay. It's just that I won't have as many characters. I won't have, of course, as big a slice of the world that I'm showing you, and I just won't have as many things happen. I'm more focused. There's not really room for subplots unless you're doing a novella or something like that. So it's pretty keyed in on just the main thing that's going to happen to the main few people that they're going to happen to. And here's the bits of the world that are relevant to the story, and you can throw in little, at least the way I'll do, I'll try to pepper in little details that show you, oh, there's a larger world that this exists in. Yeah. But that's not the story we're telling.
Yeah, I like to. I in my own head, I refer to those as the crunchy bits. I like
nice.
It's just like for a salad. I like to put in a little bit that don't necessarily contribute to what it is. They're the bacos. So it's like you could have your salad and be fine without it. But adding that other thing in is like this extra little bit that doesn't necessarily lead to another thing, but it adds a little flavor to it that lets you know that it's something. There's something else under the surface. There's something more going on. We're just not going to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Even as simple as, let's say you have a fictional city, and in this, let's say in your book or your short story, whatever, you're not going to fully explore that city. Right. But maybe you refer to a part of the city and you call it like the certain name of a district. You just give it a name for a district. Well, when the reader reads, Jeff's district, they don't realize that their mind is filling all that in and like filing that away as, okay, this is part of the world. You didn't connect that to anything. You just gave them a name of a part of the city. They're probably not going to see it, but at the same time, that fills in the little pieces for them. And all you did was use like 3 extra words to create a canvas. And kind of a backsplash. So you can use those tricks a lot with short stories to imply a larger world that maybe you necessarily haven't developed all of, which you don't have to for a short story. But it gives it's like the painted backdrop for an old movie where, unless you really look at it, like if you know what to look for, you could be like, that's a painting. Yeah. But your average person is focused on the foreground where the story is happening. Right. I'm talking and I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. Sorry.
No, it's absolutely fine. One of my favorite gags that they do, I've probably stolen this a bunch of times, but the only one I can think of right now, an example, was from Kim Possible, in that there was a point where Kim and Ron were fighting off of this thing, and suddenly there was there's a gigantic, like 10-story poodle. And like, bark, bark, bark. And so Ron looks at it and goes, that's the second biggest poodle I've ever seen.
Nice.
And I love that because automatically then you have established a story where he has seen a poodle that's larger than that. And you're like, what is that? I'd love such a simple gag, but I love it so much because that implies so much more life that has happened that you have never gotten to see. And the same thing too, like when somebody like a giant octopus monster comes through the door and the main character goes, not again. You go, wait a minute.
Well, it's like that famous Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy moment where the missile gets turned into the potted petunia.
Oh, yes.
And before it falls, it says, oh, no, not again.
Yeah. Douglas Adams, man, he's the master. And there was a pantser all the way. He had no idea from page to page what he was going to do. And yet somehow managed to pull all the stuff together.
And for the absurdist, kind of farcical style that he wrote those books in, it was absolutely perfect because you could have these weird asides, these very British diversions, that just didn't go anywhere, but they were hilarious. And because that's the type of book, you're totally on board for it.
Yeah. So as a novelist though, you have a different thing than me because I basically don't, I'm a sprinter. You're a marathon runner. Yeah. Because everything I want to do, I want to have it done, by the end of the week or whatever it is. Right. I want to finish my thing and just I want to get that endorphin. Meanwhile, you're just you're lapping me and lapping me and lapping me. So it's doing these little sprints. So when you do that, how detailed does, I say typical because you've written a couple, but I know every book is a different adventure and you're going in different directions and stuff too.
Yeah.
How much do you get down to, act 1, act 2, act 3, or is it do you get as minute as chapter by chapter? This is going to happen in this chapter? Or do you even have micro chapters within the chapter? Like this is going to happen here, then this scene, and this scene. How far down do you get in a sort of in your typical writing fashion?
So I'll give you kind of a basic outline of how I outline, and then we can, if there's any specific parts you want to dive into, of course. And you'll see it's definitely a hybrid because I almost always start with the story concept, about. And that's usually what occurs to me first. What about if this happened, or what about this kind of world, or what about a world where this happened, or this things like that. That's almost always the first thing that occurs to me.
So let's give an example for the people then, because you have a really good one. So for the Time Shift trilogy. Yes. Tell the people what it is that the first thing that occurred to you that made you go, I want to know more about that.
I had a picture pop into my head of a house with no doors. Creepy old house with no doors, only windows. And then I got this picture in my head of looking up at the window and there's somebody glaring down at you through the window. And they just kind of gave me the chills, thinking about that. That's really creepy. And then thinking, okay, I just started asking questions. Who would be in there? How did they get in there? There's no doors. What are they doing in there? They don't seem very nice. So what are they planning that's, a threat? And from there I started thinking, okay, I started kind of getting the kernel of the idea of what they were doing in there, what that guy's doing inside the house, how it's a danger to this small town that the house is in. And then I started thinking, okay, what kind of characters, I knew it was going to be teenagers. I thought, what kind of teenagers would be the kind that would see that and say, and kind of understand a little bit what's happening and say, we have to do something about this. And that's where I started with the two main characters, Malcolm and Valentine, the twins. And everything else about the plot, everything else about the characters grew from those core concepts into, a first story that, dealt with time travel and lightning storms and all that. And I was fortunate enough to get to write 2 sequels. And so that expanded into where I could start to say, okay, well, how does time travel work in this universe?
Right.
And therefore, as a result, how does the universe function? What is time? How could you use time, in other ways? And so it just, because I had the room to do it, I was able to fully explore the idea. And some ideas would just pop into my head and they ended up being ideas I could either go with or use or morph or click into other things and use. Other things just came from a lot of planning and thought, and okay, if this is how time travel works, then really trying to be logical about what does that mean and how does that work, what does that affect, can it be bent, how far, before it breaks. And then I gave it to, once, each one of those was written, I gave it to beta readers, and I would tell them literally, I want you to try to break my time travel system. Because I did not want to be one of those people who's like, as soon as the book was out, people were like, oh, there's this huge hole in how your system works.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, man. So I thought this is going to be way better if I just tell people to do it before it ever gets printed.
Right. So you're saying somehow you wouldn't want let's say the end game of your book to have huge time travel problems.
Yeah. Or to have the director and the writer disagree about how the time travel worked and all of that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm pretty proud to say I think I have a fairly bulletproof system. Of course, no system is flawless, but I feel like I ended up through a lot of planning and a lot of, beta readers and a lot of having zero pride about saying, look, break it if you can. And then if they found inconsistencies, I'd either have to fix them or find plot reasons why it was okay. And so it ended up, I think, being a pretty solid system.
Now, you had basic idea. So then, did you sit down and develop that before you started writing? I mean, I know we're brushing up against world building, which is a whole nother topic and stuff too. But like, did you have the sort of the rules established before you actually went, open up the dark and stormy night?
When it's after I get the core idea, and the core idea for the story and the world in which it exists, and the core idea for the characters, then they all start to grow together organically. And at that point, I'm not even writing really. And this is part of the part for me that is very nebulous and not methodical. I'll take weeks or longer and literally just kind of daydream about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Daydreams, possibilities, no form or function, no structure. There is nothing wrong. There's no bad ideas. And as soon as they pop in, I write them down.
You actually like have a notebook that you...
My phone. Yeah.
Oh, okay. You just use the Notes app and just put...
Yeah, either Notes app or Evernote.
Oh, okay. Evernote.
I'll use either one of those.
I like Zoho Notebook just because I like I like it because there's no restrictions like Evernote has about how many devices you can have it on, and plus
that's nice.
Syncs to the cloud and stuff too.
So that's the point where it's just, I always call it kind of like the concept stage where I'm just like a kid, just kind of playing around with it and having fun, letting the ideas come to me and playing what if. And some of those don't go far beyond the concept phase for one reason or another. I'll still write the stuff down and keep it because you never know where that might come in handy later on. But there's a certain point where everyone learns their own process. There's a certain point where just naturally, if I think it's something that's going to be legit, is really going to go, where all the daydreaming starts to become planning. It's like where some of the ideas I've come up with, I start to say, you know what, if we ordered it this way, or if this happened, then this happened, or if the world worked this way, or what if the character said this or did this? Once I start getting those ideas that are clicking together, stuff I've dreamed up, then I start to be like, okay, this could be a real thing. And that's when I'll start to be more structured. And from there, I have multiple layers of outline. So with the story, I have just the general cloud level outline. Here's the story. Here's a character start to finish, maybe 10 pages. Just kind of almost more like stream of thought too.
Okay.
Getting a lot of the core things figured out. Then I'm going to have an outline. At this point, if I've decided, okay, I'm actually going to write this, then I do the second level outline, which is it's a level deeper than that, or a level closer, where I'm starting.
First, before you get to the second level, so the first level is like full writing, or is it just still like snippets of stuff?
It's
like guy walks into a bar, guy meets girl. I mean, or is it like
concepts and ideas?
Okay. So just like snippet, not actually like full prose.
No, not at all.
Okay.
So yeah, it is concepts and ideas. That's it. It's not even dialogue yet at that point.
Okay. So then when you get to the like formatting,
that I'm not formatting that at all at that point. Basically, it's at that point I already will usually have an idea of like points A, B, and C.
Sure.
Just in general. So when I start writing that, usually I'll start with how it starts and end with how I think it's going to end. But in the middle it can be pretty nebulous. The next version down, like the closer in level of outline, that's where I'm starting to take the stuff I've thought of and organize it into like I'm putting it into like acts 1, 2, and 3. Here's what could be the low point. Here's different character beats and other here's probably like the inciting incident and just so I'm getting it into like a very loosely molded piece of clay that resembles, you could see like this could be a story. And at that point I'm getting I'm getting a lot of things clear in my head. I'm starting to see and get to know the characters a little more. If I've got to flesh out whatever I have to flesh out world building wise, that's where it really starts to happen. Cause I really want to understand how things are going to work. And that's where it starts to really become a story. Then I've got the up close, like right up in your face outlined, which I only do in chunks. So I'll write the very up close outline for 3 or 4 chapters at most. And that's literally every story beat, everything that happens. That's when a lot of dialogue will start occurring to me. So I'll start jotting that down. It's almost like a really rough, ugly script, like a screenplay almost. Okay. So there's not a ton of prose, it's a lot of beats and dialogue and things. And it's only after I've done that I'll go back and start to actually write those chapters. And one of the reasons I do that kind of iteratively like that is I still am leaving myself room for coming up with better ideas and coming up with things like, I don't want to do that whole up close outline all the way through because I know inevitably I'm going to think of something better for certain things. And in the moment, I'm going to come up with character things that I wouldn't have thought of before. Because it's as I'm writing, that's when I really start to get to know the characters. Mm-hmm. And that's when I'm in danger of the characters steering a scene in the direction I had not considered. So I still am leaving myself room. And that's where another place I'm a little bit of a hybrid because because the outline is never the authority to me. The story is always the authority. And if, something better presents along the way, the outline is always going to change to accommodate it.
That's where I like the roadmap thing. My analogy I always like to think of it is I'm going from New York to Los Angeles. I want to stop at Chicago. I want to stop at St. Louis. I want to stop at Phoenix. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I don't know where it's going to go. So it's like, I know where I started. I know where I'm going, but I know that along the way things are going to get weird. But I also know the stops along the way that I want to get to. But in between those, who knows?
Right. Yeah, it's playtime in between those.
Yeah.
And and I do another ancillary outline for any major characters, the main characters and the main supporting characters. Mm-hmm. I do an outline that is solely for character arcs.
Oh wow!
And I actually draw arcs for all the characters.
Draw.
So, yeah. And I say draw. I shouldn't say draw.
Okay. I was about to be really excited. No, you actually draw the things out?
I don't create them like cartoons. What I mean is, so character Jim starts at a point at this point over here, and I want him to end up like this at the end of the story.
Okay. So,
what character things need to happen in order to change Jim from this at the opening of the story to this at the end? So I'll try to identify, it's usually 5 or 6 beats that are slowly guiding the character towards where I want him to be at the end. And what I'll do is I'll draw like an arc like this, like literally like an arch. And at 5 or 6 points along the way, I'll note in just a couple of sentences, this is what happens to continue to push him along his arc.
Yeah.
Until we get to the top where it's kind of like the character crisis, and then how does that resolve into whatever I want it to end up as, whether it's, the good guy becoming better or the bad guy getting worse, or even, redemption or whatever. For me, doing it visually like that actually really helps me to envision the character arc.
So then you have those beats like in then your master document, like as you're like, basically like they walk into the library, discuss the thing, like, and then have a thing like an asterisk, sort of like, this is where Jim learns he needs to play well with others. Yeah,
those get written into the outline for sure.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So it's like I hyper plan in some ways and I hyper don't in others.
Okay, then let's talk about that. Where is it that you sort of leave yourself room to like, I don't know what's going to happen. Let's see.
Mm-hmm. Definitely mostly at the beginning. The farther along I go, usually the heavier I'm going to plan. When it comes to dialogue, I mean, can you ever plan dialogue? I'm trying to think. Once
in a while, I actually just had this happen to me where I knew the scene I was going to do. I knew the characters that were in it. And then I was like, okay, so they're talking the yap, and what is it going to be? And then I was like, oh, she's going to make this analogy about the guy. She's going to say, oh, you're like a shark or whatever it was. I actually know what it was, but I don't want to give it away because it's too good. Like, you're like a shark. Oh, what do you mean? Like, oh, you have dead eyes or whatever it is. I was like, boom, boom, boom. Like, oh yeah, she's gonna nail him with that one. So sat down, wrote the entire thing, went away. The next day, I was like, oh man, I really know that scene. Oh man, I didn't put that line in. Like the whole thing. I was like, I was gonna build to this big thing of like, you're a shark, and didn't even put it in. Like, okay, well that's that, and that's the thing is. For me, at least, when I'm writing a conversational scene, dialogue scene, which in audio drama, that's all it is, I'm just listening. Like, I know as much as it is like, yes, there are my characters. Yes, I'm doing it. They all sound like me at the end of the day, I guess. I'm just listening and transcribing. So I don't know, honestly, what they're going to say because someone says something and then here's how that person answers. And if it's a different character, they're going to answer it a different way. And that's where the weird thing of like, I know it's me, but at the same time, I know what they would and wouldn't say.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of like having a dream where you're experiencing the thing that you're creating in real time.
Yes. Yes.
So it's very much like that, especially when you really get into like that flow state where like the scene is really singing and the characters are really like bouncing off each other. Yeah. And that gets easier the more you get to know your characters because it's so much easier for them to just kind of take it and run. And that's when it was really fun for me because even though I tend to write stuff with, action and kind of bombastic stuff, my favorite stuff is always the character stuff. In fact, this next one I have coming out is very character heavy. There's very little genre stuff in it at all.
Wow.
But I really like, the character interactions are so fun to me that it's just a joy when they really start to, like, it doesn't take effort. Like, it's just, they're, like you said, they're just talking. And, their humor comes out. And you've probably experienced in this where you laugh out loud at something your quote unquote character said.
Yes.
Even though your brain said it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would always tell when I'm doing a reading of one of my things, I always tell people, just so you know, I am going to laugh at this because I just as for one, it's not egotism. It's that I have my sense of humor.
Right, yeah. I know what I think is funny.
Yeah, and that's why I put it in, because I thought it was funny. And so when it comes back from your mouth, I'm going to laugh because I think it's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, and
they might think I'm an egotistical jerk, but I'm like, no, fine, I'll take it. But at the same time, no,
you just have to embrace the weirdness of what it is to do this.
Yeah.
And go along with it. And well, like I'll give you an example. In the most recent novel I ever written, it's not out, but there's, it's teenage characters. And there's a scene when they're in the lunchroom. This little skinny kid basically lives on Twinkies. And there's this other friend who's just built like a tank. And he's eating like a sushi roll. And the big tank guy asked the little guy, how are you so thin? When that's all you eat. And the little guy points at his sushi and says, how are you built like Colossus from the X-Men when that's all you eat? And and it just went on. The big guy's like, this is real food. And The skinny guy is like, this is real food. I can eat it, so that makes it real. And yeah, you write that, and I had a blast with it. I still remember it, obviously, so I liked it.
Yeah.
And you just think, well, I hope other people think it's funny, because I do.
Yeah, I've actually. This is where maybe the usage comes in. I found myself quoting stuff that I've written, and then not realizing it, and going, "Oh, that was really good. Where's that from?" Oh yeah,
Me,
I wrote that.
My favorite writer.
Me. Because I wrote an adaptation of 20,000 Leagues, and so I'm gonna talk about that more in just a second, because I'm talking about outlining, how I outlined that, which is not the way you did it. And one of the things that it has, because I want to have my Captain Nemo be really severe, and so it's also a woman in it, so it's she. So when someone makes a mistake, she says, "Don't be smart. Don't be sorry. Be better." And I found myself one of my kids did something, and I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be better." And I'm like, "Oh man, I just quoted myself."
A wise man once said.
A wise man once said. There was something I had heard in a production that someone was a real poet, a bard,
Right. Yeah.
So I am much more of a pantser, because I don't do any of that stuff that you said. I wish I did. Like, I wish I took more notes. I wish I'd outlined, but I don't. And I always feel like I'm always like running in front of the train, like just trying to frantically put down stuff, because I got hired to write an adaptation of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea for a youth theater. And so they basically, the only caveats they said was the entire story takes place inside of a submarine. Like, so there's no going out, no walk on the seafloor, no going to mysterious islands. Like,
Probably
all is inside.
Set constraints, right?
Right,
Probably.
exactly. So it's Crimson Tide, essentially, for youth. But like, the
Phone
idea was
booth.
that they wanted to build, they wanted to build like a submarine that like the audience was inside with them. So like, we're all trapped in here together, kind of thing. Like, okay, so that's one constraint. And the second one, that's a chase, that there's someone pursuing them. So it's like a, like, so so like the Crimson Tide was one of my things that I was kind of thinking about. Hunt for October, like those kind of submarine things. So I was like, okay, how the hell am I going to do this? So like I absorbed every version of 20,000 Leagues. I watched from like the black and white silent one all the way to there's a television adaptation, like everything, to see what everyone did. And then I sat down with a piece of paper, and I wrote down every submarine cliche I could think of. Like what has to be in every submarine movie. And so I like that. So I wrote like iceberg, and then like going too deep, and like all these things. And basically that was the only outline I ever had. Like I had basically what I was like, okay, so they do this thing, and then, like, because I knew the basics of, like, you have to introduce Captain Nemo, you have to introduce the people who come on board, you have to introduce the conflict, the person who's chasing him, all that stuff. Okay, that's just plot, like you basically do that in order. But then I was like, okay, now what happens? And I would go to my list. Iceberg, okay. So they have to go to south. And they go like, okay, they have to go too deep. Why are they going too deep? Because the person is pursuing them. All right, so they go too deep. like all these things, like how they get food, and like all these things. So like I would just one by one go and check off the list until I got to the end, and I was like, oh yeah, look at that. I'm at 90 minutes. Like that was, I got to the end, and then like
nice.
and then everyone dies. Whatever. Like, but that was the only outline I ever did. But it was, I mean. I guess, but I'm not saying don't outline to people. I'm saying like there's different ways of doing it. I just keep it running in my head. Like I sort of know all the stuff is. I wish I was better at taking notes. I wish I was better at outlining. I keep trying to, and I just want to get to writing.
Yeah, I totally get that, and and I will say the heaviness with which I planned was largely started because with the Time Shift trilogy, I knew I'm going to have a large cast of characters. I'm going to have crazy time travel stuff. Yeah. If I don't like keep hold of this, like if I don't keep an iron grip on this thing, it's going to spin out of control. Yeah. So that's why I went in such a heavy planner. And there are some books I'm still that way with. But then there are others like this one that's coming out, This Last Adventure. Coming out February 1st from Lerner.
Can it be pre-ordered now?
In November, probably.
Oh, in November. Okay. All right. Yeah. So this fall.
Yes. So, but this book, because it was less of that, I knew it was just going to be a one-off book. Mm-hmm. It was a much more personal story. I still did, a good bit of outlining and things, but it was definitely like the light version of what I described.
Right.
Because I wasn't juggling universe bending stuff. It was a much more up close and personal thing, so I could be a little freer with that. So I'm not stringent on the process. It definitely breathes and expands and contracts depending on what I'm writing.
Do you have emotional beats like written in to the outline for like what you're going to do? Like keep this light, or I mean, do you like make notes to yourself of like like where you're at in the journey to make sure the tone of the scene is right?
I do my best. Yeah, of course. Sometimes with that, you want that's where good beta readers come in, because they may be able to say, hey, if you're not hitting the tone that you were going for.
Right.
There would be times when I wanted to shift from something intense to something heartfelt, but the readers would say, this feels intense the whole way through. So I'd have to find a way to shift it from intense to going down to something heartfelt. And, I always, one of my main questions in every scene is, what do I want to make the reader feel in this scene?
Okay.
And so a lot of my energy, especially when I'm at the writing point where, there's pen to paper, that's one of the main things in the forefront of my mind is, what do I want you to feel in this scene? And I try to write to that. That's one of the reasons that music is such a huge part of my process, because a lot of scenes have a soundtrack, and I'll choose a song that has both the rhythm and the feel that I want the scene to accomplish. And that helps me really thread that needle a lot better.
So that's part of your preparation, is getting that. So now,
if there's a scene,
actual songs, singing songs.
Yeah, well, it could be. It depends on the scene. Sometimes they're instrumental, stuff from movie soundtracks or whatever. Sometimes not. I skew towards instrumental in quieter scenes, because I don't want the lyrics to distract me or throw me off. But if it's a higher energy scene, then it often doesn't matter if there's words or not, because if it happens to be let's say I'm writing a fight scene, if it's an instrumental song that matches it, great. If it's a song with words, I'll just crank it up to the volume where I'm not even really hearing the words. It's just a wall of noise around me, and then I'll just kind of let that seep into the bones of the scene. But music's a huge part of the process.
Wow. Okay, so you don't have a standard just writing mix that you just play? Every book has a different one, or every scene has a different one, or do you have every book has a different that's actually one of my early, I didn't even touch on this. It's one of my early things when I'm in the conceptual stage. Yeah. One of the things I'll do is build the soundtrack for it, because actually building the soundtrack helps me develop the story. Because I'll go in with ideas, this is kind of how I want it to feel, and I'll start identifying songs and putting them in the playlist that match that. But then I'll come across songs that I didn't expect, but once it starts playing, I'm like, you know what, that could turn this scene into that, or it could make this feeling really matches something I already knew I wanted to accomplish, or this sounds like it would be the theme to this character, and it would help me kind of get there. Get that character's personality fleshed out a little more. And so that's actually fairly early in my process when I build that. And then when I'm actually writing, it's either one of those songs, or if it's in one of those in-between things, where something doesn't have a specific thing I chose for, I go to rainymood.com. I just have rain. I have thunderstorm sounds in the background. Okay. And that started because when I was writing the Timeshare trilogy, that's very weather heavy. Yeah. So I thought, hey, well, this is perfect. Thunderstorms in the background. And it just became my go-to white noise. And now, if no matter what I'm writing, if it's something that doesn't have a specific song, I go to that. Wow. Okay. Yeah. My go-to things are video game soundtracks are big. Oh, nice. I like that. But then also it depends on the mood of too. But I really like park loops. So for really hardcore Disney fans, every part of every Disney park has a background track that plays, usually about an hour of music, and it just loops. And so I can just throw that on, and it's it's all instrumental, and it's all designed to be in the background of whatever it is that you're doing. So I find that, and it's also usually high energy or depending on what it is, and also but it also can go by genre too. So if it's something silly, like there's a sort of old timey thing in Main Street USA, or there's the more sci-fi thing of Tomorrowland, but they're designed to not draw attention to themselves. So I find that they're good for background.
There's this one website, and I'm blanking on the name, but it's sort of like Rainy Mood, but it gives you a number of different sounds, and you can choose there's volume sliders for each one. Okay. There's like sort of like a background coffee shop sound. There's campfire. There's this and that. And I used that for, like, I used the campfire sounds for one scene in this new book that they were around a campfire. Mm-hmm. And I did something another thing I'd never done before, because there's one chapter where there's no sound in the chapter, except the only sound that's described is the main character's heartbeat, because he's terrified in the scene. So while I was writing that scene, I found a 10-hour heartbeat loop on wow. It didn't take me 10 hours, but I found like a 10-hour heartbeat loop on YouTube, and I cranked it up to where that's all I could hear in my headphones. And that I kind of, you just, you kind of hack your own brain and tricked it into sort of writing in that rhythm.
Huh. So when you have outline, do you know? Obviously, you know what you're going to write each day. So, like, now you sit down, time to write. You go, like, I have this thing. Do you actually, like, look at your thing and go, this is Monday, this is Tuesday, this is Wednesday? Or I guess I should say, this is next. This is the one after that as well. Because, obviously, life happens. And you can't necessarily know that Tuesday you're going to get to write. You hope you can. But
yeah.
Do you have it like done by like this is day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4? I mean, actually, do you take the outline and move it to a calendar?
Well, I write sequentially, so
okay,
that makes
I was going to ask that too.
Yeah, so basically, I'll outline the next few chapters, mm-hmm. And then I just know when I sit down to write, I'm writing whatever the next chapter is, and then I stop when I have to, and then that actually, because I always know what's coming next. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily say, okay, like Monday the 3rd, I'm writing this. Tuesday the 4th, I'm writing this, because I just know whatever's next in the story, that's the next thing I'm writing. Okay. So whenever I sit down to write next, I know what's on the docket. And again, there's no right or wrong way for that.
I also write sequentially. I've never been able to.
Yeah, some people write like the candy scenes first, like they get all their favorite scenes done. Yeah. To me, I can't imagine doing that, because for me, part of the way I get myself through the scenes that I need to do that I'm not necessarily super jazzed about is knowing that candy scene is coming, that I'm going to get to write. Yeah. So it's like the carrot on the stick for myself. And just as an example of how there's really no one right way to do it, there's a friend of mine. I won't give her name because she may not want her process out there, but she's a New York Times bestseller. So this will tell you that, anything's valid. Once she gets an idea that she knows she's going to write, she essentially locks herself in a room for a few weeks until that's done, and like runs herself insanely ragged, and just it's like, she's bleeding out, and she just won't stop until the first draft is done, and it takes her a few weeks. Wow. And then she'll go back and kind of hammer it into shape and things. So, but yeah, it's the complete opposite of the way I do it. Yeah. And
I've suffered for my art, but like, I don't think I could torture myself for my art.
And that's just what she needs to do to get them out there.
Yeah.
So it's very funny because we all have our own quirks.
Right. Everybody's got their own weird process they need to do. I didn't come through. I did writing obviously through high school and college and stuff too, but I never took any formal, official, like, here's how to write a novel, here's how to write a screenplay courses at all. I feel like all my on-the-job training before I actually sat down to write my first thing was Dungeons and Dragons. Was playing role-playing games. So whenever I think about plotting and stuff too, I think in terms of role-playing games. I mean, it's a different process than just about. And I know we've talked about this before, so this is nothing new that you've heard, but it'll be new to the listeners, because when you're a dungeon master, I actually most stuff I do is not D&D, but I'll use D&D terms because that's the most popular right now. When you're dungeon master, you can set the world but you are not the main character. Like your players are the main characters, and you don't know what they're going to do. So you sort of have to just like design a world and tell your story with a certain amount of freedom because you don't know what they're going to do. And so you have to be able to react and change stuff too. And I sort of, when I started out, it was very, very dictatorial. And then the further I went along, like, oh, okay, none of us are having fun now. So like, let's, if I open it up and be like, okay, what are you going to do now? It became a lot more exciting. And so I always find that's how I approach a scene is I have my main characters. I know, like, essentially, I know what their personalities are. I know what they will and won't do. And then I have my NPCs, essentially, whoever their antagonists, whoever is around, and I put them in a room together, and then I see what happens. So I don't always, like, I know that, okay, so this one, they have to get from here to there. Like, they have to get past whatever, the guard, and how they're going to do it. I don't know. Let's find out. And so, like, I have set the stakes, and then I just sort of let the players play, and then I just sort of write down what happens. Like, I know that the good guys are going to win or the bad guys are going to win in this case, but that's pretty much all I know. So that's all I've planned for the situation. Like, I mean, I know scene one is this. Like, for a swashbuckling script, it'll be scene one is this, scene two is this, scene three is that, and that's pretty much all there usually is. It's just, essentially 3 acts, even though they're very, very small acts. And I have like, okay, the ladies are going to find out about a thing. They're going to meet the guy. He's going to give them the thing. They're going to fight here. They're going to do it. And then how do they resolve it? And I don't honestly know when I start out how they're going to beat this person or how they're going to win or if they're going to lose or any of that kind of stuff. I just sort of let it happen and see. So I kind of like I have a structure, but within that structure, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I get that. Because I think in each one of the books I've done, I have 90% of the end game figured out.
Right.
But there's 10% that I just kind of trust I'm gonna get it.
Yeah.
I trust that. All right, by the time I get there and I'm going to write, I'll figure something out. And so far, I've been able to do it each time. So
I know. It's like, I pulled it off again. I don't know how it happened. Right. I managed to fool him again.
Yeah, there's been some times where it's like, I don't know how this is all going to, I know the threads. I know in general this and this and that, but there's this thing over here that I'm not sure how I'm going to resolve or like how that's going to make sense with all the rest of it. And inevitably I end up, just with the momentum you build, getting the rest of the story done. I feel like that energy kind of feeds into coming up with stuff that's going to work and filling in the blanks. And so, I don't always have to know like 100% everything by the time I'm writing. Although sometimes, I get super specific. It just depends. Like, by the time I was done with the first time shift book, I knew what the last scene of the last book was going to be. Ah,
okay. Yeah. Ending is what I was going to come to next, sort of as an ending for our conversation.
Nice.
Have you always known the ending before you start writing?
Always. Let me think. For the books that have come out that I've actually sold, for the most part, yeah.
Okay.
Or at least
or specifically.
It's a mix of both.
Okay.
There are certain parts of like the end that I know 100% ironclad. This is going to happen, and it's going to happen this way.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily figure everything out like that, though. And some things, like I said, sometimes something happens and it just changes your plan. Well, for example, there's a character that for a long time I planned to kill in the third time shift book. And there was another character that I had planned to die first, and I did that. That character died, and it was so painful I decided not to kill the other one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because it was like it hurt me so bad killing that one character in the final book that I thought I can't do this again. And so I figured
they were spared from
they were spared blade. And I figured out another ending for that character.
Wow.
Sometimes stuff like that will happen, and you got to be willing to go with it if it feels right.
Yeah.
As far as for the time shift books, as far as like the overarching, the high points of how it was going to end, who was going to end up where. by the end, I know all of that. This is another case where, like, the main villain for that one, I didn't figure out 100% how they were going to win until not that long before I wrote those scenes. I knew I had the threads, but it was one of those things that, and I knew kind of in general the threads that I wanted to use in that, but I hadn't put it all together. And so it was kind of fun for me when I realized, oh yeah, they can do it this way. And it was very satisfying because it's like, oh man, I built this world and these characters to the point where I can use the things I've already established in the world to do this. I don't have to create anything new. So yeah, that was actually very satisfying. It's like,
you can fool yourself into thinking you know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's like, it's almost like I did this on purpose. So yeah,
high five, past Ryan.
Right? Yeah, good work, me. So yeah, as I'm sure it's obvious, like there's what's super planned for me and what's not. They all tend to interweave with each other. Okay. And the farther along I've gotten with this, the more comfortable I've become with that. Knowing that there are some things I absolutely have to have planned in order to write with confidence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and because the overall plan, that's what it allows me to do, is to really write. If I know and generally where I'm going, I can write much more confidently, and I can know where I'm ultimately aiming everything, which is going to affect how I narrate certain scenes. It's going to allow me to put in little hints and things that are fun for me to put in, that you're not going to pick up until like a second read. Then you're like, oh, okay, I could see how this was pointing to that the whole time. But yeah, at the same time, there are some things that I'm totally comfortable with not planning and until I'm there.
So as you've written over the course of years, like obviously you've been at the desk for years now.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself outlining / planning more, or are you like, oh, I've done this enough times that I can do that, or is it by project?
It's by project. So this book that's coming out, I didn't outline as much. The one that I just finished writing late last year that we're currently shopping around, I planned more than that one. So not on the time shift level, but definitely higher than this last one. And again, with that, I went back to kind of a larger cast of characters. The story was a little bit grander in scope. At the same time, it's not a time travel story, so it's not it's not as tricky.
Right.
So
you can just be linear.
Yeah, I can be a little more linear with it. And so, yeah, it's somewhere in between those two. So it does kind of bend and flex depending on the needs of the project.
Meet Zinnia.
You are being very polite to someone who is attempting to kill us.
Her wife, Saffron.
You can plan all you want, but what matters is what you do when your plan falls apart.
And their best friend, Goldie.
Glad we didn't miss all the fun.
Swords in hand, they defend their city from the worst of humanity.
I am Lord Buxton Blue. Vicious Suave. The Fraconian Ring. Herr Haig.
Equity Electric.
Follow their adventures on the Swashbuckling Ladies Debate Society audio drama podcast. Available now at truestory.fm/swashbuckling.
All right. Well, then before we head out here, let's see if we can make a little magic ourselves. So
cool.
I have a list of elements. Like I have a genre, a location, and an object. So we are going to take one of each of those things and see if we can come up with some sort of a story based on that. So I have a list in front of me. So I will ask you to pick a number between. I'm sorry. The top row actually takes up a number as well. So actually, it would be 16 different genres in this one. So pick a number between 1 and 16.
7.
Ooh, it's a fantasy.
Okay.
Let's see. For locations, I have more. This is actually 30 different
21.
locations. 21. Oh, okay. 21 is a gas or filling station. I should write this down.
Interesting.
Fantasy. Gas station. And for an object to include, I have 30 of those as well.
12.
12 is a forged painting.
Whoa. Okay.
Okay, so let's see if we can come up with something here. So it's a fantasy story involving a gas station and a forged painting. Okay. My first thought is that the painting is magical or cursed.
Okay. Yeah.
So if it's a gas station, that has to be some sort of like, this has to be urban fantasy or something like that, unless we have some sort of filling station for unicorns or dragons.
Yeah. Unless you play fast and loose with the term like gas station.
True. It could be way station. It could be.
Or it could be even like, I mean, yeah, man, it could be so many things.
Right.
It could be.
Let's stick to fantasy. So it
could be an inn or a tavern.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh, I feel like that's too easy.
It's a little too like fantasy tropey.
So it's like a bunch of people need to discuss a forged painting at a tavern. I'm like, that's the start of a D&D campaign.
Maybe there's a certain type of magic that you have to refill a receptacle for the magical energy. So.
Okay. So like sort of we're brushing at steampunky kind of thing where there's like there's vehicles that go along, but they have to be filled up by some sort of pixie dust-esque something or other.
Yeah, it could be a vehicle. I wasn't even thinking vehicle. I was thinking like, if you had some, of course we could go with vehicle, but I was even thinking like a filling station for, what if, whatever the magic system it is, what if it's powered by these stones that have to be replenished, almost like kyber crystals, but their power has to be reinfused every once in a while,
right?
Or you just trade in your dead stones for live ones, and then the dwarves that mine them will reinfuse them.
Oh,
and
okay.
resell them.
Or you swap them out.
Yeah, you just swap.
Like you basically take out the things,
like the Tesla battery, where instead of recharging, you just swap out the battery.
Right, pull out the battery, and put it in a new one.
Like, my gems are dead. I need new. I need new gems.
I guess would they be? Let's see how far into the world. But are they like flying wagons? I mean, are they basically fantasy version of cars, or are they?
What would you like?
Carriages.
What sounds good to you?
I don't know. It's. I always want fantasy. I always want to go farther. I don't want to have it be like, oh, it's like a car, but it's magic. It's like, oh, I don't want to. I don't want to just take a thing that we have and just be like, no, it's magic. I'm trying to think of something that's a little bit more.
Well, what if they're like, maybe this isn't a mode of transportation that everybody uses. It's specialized, but I mean, what if the gems or whatever are portal machines? You use them to to pop open a wormhole or something, and so maybe it's one trip per gem or something, and once you're out of gems, you got to get a new bag of rocks so you can keep. But only ones who can actually take advantage of it are actually able to use it. So it could be a very rare thing. What
if they're like automatons essentially? Like what if like it's actually like a mechanical animal? Like it's a thing that actually flies, like actually has flapping wings.
Like a Mecha Pegasus.
Yeah, exactly. But then it's powered by a thing.
Yeah, it's like a gem.
Have the stones or whatever.
So like the powered like a gem heart that's...
right. And it has to be either filled up or whatever. So like this is a way station. So
that could be fun because you could have like the rich guys have the Pegasus and like the Mecha Dragon.
Yeah.
And like the poor guys have the Mecha Donkey.
Yeah.
Or
or just like the hierarchy of flying animals. So like when you get to the bottom, it's just like I have a pigeon. That's the Edsel of it goes up from there and have
how do you fly on that pigeon?
They're the ones that are everywhere. There's like 1,000 pigeons flying around, but there's only like 2 or 3 dragons.
Yeah, what if the poorest of them almost use the pigeons as like like the kite boarders where maybe the pigeon pulls them, but they're on a skateboard or something. So they can't actually fly, but the pigeons.
Oh yeah, they can glide. So they all have to like glom onto a bigger thing and then like sort of kite their way down.
But I like the hierarchy of mechanized animals as transportation powered by these gem hearts.
Yeah.
What if someone's trying to sell a painting in exchange for gems?
Okay. Oh, I could say that's the thing is that people are obviously paying for the service.
Yeah.
To get their gems charged,
not just anyone,
or whatever.
Not just anyone can reinfuse the gems. So it's a service that you purchase. So what if somebody is? I guess we
established that like why there's a gas station there, but I guess that doesn't have to be part of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that they're doing something else, but it would be interesting to have a a chase scene with these things, like falling from like you sort of like a Attack of the Clones. You know, that sort of that idea of like someone like running and having to leap from.
Flying machines to flying machines.
Yeah, exactly. Flying machine, or
especially if maybe they're all like
between the two of them.
Maybe they're all like maybe a bunch of them are like hovering in a line to get the refill.
Yeah,
so it's a convenient thing to hop back.
Oh,
so that could be like the jumping like running on top of the car roofs like in a chase scene or something.
I like that. Is that like if this guy goes to sell. Or whoever it is, we have to figure out who our main character is to sell the painting, and it goes wrong,
and so he's got to run. So
he has to escape. Yeah,
yeah. Okay,
so I guess let's talk about character then. So who is our main person?
Well, he's somebody who would be willing to trade a forged painting for magical gems.
True. So he's a
grifter of some sort,
or she, or I guess we have to figure that out too. Is someone who's hustling, so they have obviously aspirations above where they're at, and so they're trying to ascend to a thing because there's very strict. Even what we're talking about, a class structure is already developing just from talking about that. So
the have dragons and the have not dragons,
right? the have dragons and the have not dragons. That might be our title. I'm writing that down.
I could almost see this as an opening scene of like, this is somebody starts as this, at least appearing to be this grifter type. And maybe they actually are, or maybe there's some deeper reason that they're trying to do this.
Or or they're just really good at appearing that way. This is their first time trying to do this. And obviously it goes terribly wrong. Or it always goes wrong for them. Like, or perpetually trying to do this.
Or it could almost be like the Han Solo type character that the hero or heroine meets up with, like at a certain point where maybe they're trying to get through somewhere and they happen to be here or in line to do this like everybody else, and then they happen to be like there when this grifter is trying to hawk this fake painting. So it's a forged painting. Did our main character forge it, or are they just the ones selling it, or stole it, or whatever? Like, are they actually an artist? So maybe that's like they were an actual artist, and they found that no one was interested in their arts until they did an exact replica of a famous piece of art, and then suddenly everybody got really excited about that, and so now they're sort of like it's what they always wanted to do, but not in the way they always wanted to do it. That could be interesting, yeah.
So you already have that conflict there of like the thing I'm successful at, makes me feel bad, even though I really enjoyed the process.
So that could be the thing that like that's their backstory, unfulfilled wish, to be a successful artist in their own right.
Yes, to do their stuff as opposed to recreating other people's.
Yeah, that makes me wonder if there could be like, I'm wondering, could the painting, because it seems like they would have to fail to make the trade, like to sell the painting. But would it be interesting if the painting
is it a trap? Like, is it the cops, or is it a setup? Or
well, I'm wondering about the painting itself. It would be interesting if the forged painting was actually a commission, and they what if they actually painted?
That's really good.
What if they actually painted over something else that it ends up being a key factor in the story?
Oh, that's interesting.
But they don't realize it, so they're trying to hawk it just to get where they need to go. But it ends up being like one of the keys to this whole thing is like hidden under the forgery they did.
That's interesting. I was also wondering if the original got destroyed and theirs is the only one left. And I don't know if this is putting a hat on a hat, but it's like a Goonies thing where like there's a map like hidden in the image, to get to the thing or whatever.
Well, if we're dialing kind of higher into the hijinks, there could be big fan of hijinks. Yeah, there could be multiple reasons that this painting
because it has to be that everybody wants it.
Yeah, there could be, or maybe even at this point in the story, the grifter character doesn't even realize what they have. So they have no idea why people want this painting, or maybe maybe at this point in the story, if it's early enough, don't even realize that people are after the painting. which could explain why they're just trying to trade it for some.
That's really
gems.
good. It could be okay. So we have it that they were commissioned to do the thing. Maybe it's a lost painting. Let's say like a lost Renoir sort of style of the thing that they were able to recreate off of documents or whatever. They actually do it. So it looks just like it. And now because this sort of key, this map is now in play, now all of a sudden everybody wants it.
And then you could have other people who
they'd be happy to get rid of it. Like the forger would be happy, like I'm happy to get, but now everybody's after them to get the thing.
So yeah, some people want it because they know that there's this thing underneath. There's like this map underneath. Maybe some people really believe that it's the lost painting, so they're after it because they want the painting.
Right. So you have like militant art collectors, like the army of the Guggenheim is after them as well.
The people who want the map are enemies of the people who want the painting.
Yeah,
because they both want it for different reasons.
That's right. And then there's our person caught in the middle.
Yeah, and then like the people who just want the painting think that the people who know there's a map underneath are crazy or like conspiracy theorists because there's like because they believe it's real. There's like there's no way there's a map underneath that, and the others are like it's a forgery. There's a map underneath it. So you could have different factions that believe wholly opposite things about the painting.
Yeah,
that could be fun.
Okay, so then our artist then. It feels like this feels like a man, so that makes me want to have it be a woman.
Sure, I think it works either way.
I think because it seems like that would be the typical thing would be that. So I'm interested to see it sort of from a female perspective of like art school dropout or kicked out, or actually probably had to leave because of circumstances.
Maybe her like underworld forger identity is male.
Interesting.
As an extra layer of anonymity, sort of like Max from Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
Just
everyone assumes.
Everyone assumes, and she maybe adopts a moniker as the forger to sort of encourage that.
Yeah.
Banksy or whatever.
Right. Yeah. To keep the two things separate, because in the same way that Stan Lee used a pen name because he knew he was going to eventually go off and write something important, not silly men dressed as spiders, that has like a different persona because it didn't want to get in the way of when she becomes a real famous artist. And what better way to have it be that, it's instead of Maxine, it's Max.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're dealing with extra hijinks because there's dual identities.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Then people who only know the one instead of the other.
Mm-hmm. And then they're like, we're looking for Max. No, we're looking for Maxine.
I like that.
Yeah.
Right.
So there would have to be
the idea of like a literal strata of like the city is built on layers like that like sort of like the from lowest to highest and almost
the upper crust and then
exactly. But everything like almost like giant birdhouses where like they're like almost like Cloud City, but like there actually is something that they're building up on top of, and then obviously the rich and powerful are at the top.
Or kind of like a fantasy version of the Fifth Element where like the new city is built on top of the old city.
Right. Yeah. So like the people at the bottom are the foundation. They're like what keeps things running. But then there's like a long almost pole where no one lives, like the missing middle class thing.
Maybe those are like the servants' quarters for the.
Oh yeah.
There could be like the middle layer could be. I mean, technically the middle class, but literally they're there because they're there to support and serve the upper class.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be interesting.
Yeah, and that's our filling station would be sort of in that middle area, like floating thing, or because everybody has to either have to descend or go up to it because that's
and you would need blue collar workers to run the depot and to reinfuse the gems and all of that because the upper crust certainly aren't going to do that. So
have or have not dragons. I'm trying to think if there's something that we can do in there for the title. All right, do we need to name our main characters? Okay, now that she has two names.
Oh right, okay.
Boy, something.
It really.
I don't know how specific you want to be. I know you've run panels like this at cons.
It really.
Specific do we need to be?
If you want to name them, sure. It really, for me, names are like I take a long time on names.
Okay.
But if your gut is telling you some names, let's go with them.
It's not. The Maxine thing is basically, I think I would probably have that for a long time.
And then rename her.
Yeah, exactly. Until the thing that I would just do global search and replace.
Yeah, I'm like, some people just like will we'll just kind of pick a name and they'll go with it. I tend to usually I'll agonize over names depending on the name. So yeah, I'm not usually a rapid fire namer. So yeah, Max Maxine is good for short because it's just like you, I would almost certainly put Max and Maxine in like brackets, knowing that I was going to come back and overwrite that with the actual names I chose.
Yeah, exactly. Control F.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So yeah, I guess we would, at least my next question would be, why is she at this station?
Right.
At this moment, what's she trying to do? She's trying to get somewhere, I'd imagine.
Right. So this is opening scene. Like, I like that you start out from you establish stuff, and then you have the chase scene and stuff, and then
she's desperate to get somewhere.
Right. So she's trying to. So she doesn't even like to do this thing. She doesn't like to meet up in person, but this was a big deal. So someone had commissioned this lost historical piece. And so she recreated it from all of the stuff and then is now presenting it. Okay, so then something goes terribly wrong. So she's meeting up with the people who commissioned her. This
would have to be after that, right? Because she's trying to trade the painting.
Right, she has it, so it's done. So she's meeting up with the people who commissioned it to sell it to them. Like, here it is. What do you think?
Oh, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
You see, and then someone else had found out about this and also wants it. Or
what if
what goes wrong, I guess, is the next big thing.
So yeah, I wonder if they're at the station because she's actually meeting inside somebody, it would be like getting in somebody's car and we're going to do the deal while we're driving around.
Right.
So they're there to do the deal right there.
Yeah.
But something goes wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. Or in the back room of the filling station, so we can actually have the gas station be like a.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a neutral place because she knows that there's traffic. So maybe she doesn't want to go to an isolated location with these people.
Yeah, or maybe one of the high class people owns the station through a shell company or something.
Oh, that's interesting.
They use it for all of their illicit backroom deals.
Oh, right. Yeah,
because no one would ever
think.
Yeah, no one would ever think that I would.
All sorts of cargo. Yeah, just unload stuff while they're getting.
So they arrive in disguise. No one would ever think they would sully themselves by coming down to the middle level.
Yeah.
But so it's the perfect cover to come there and do all their nefarious dealings.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so she's got, okay. So yeah, something obviously goes wrong.
Right. So another
faction
finds out about this and then breaks in and interrupts the meeting. No, it's gonna be ours. But see, it seems to be that it would start a bidding war, and she'd be like, "Oh, well, then who wants it more?" It has to be someone who's not willing to negotiate. So maybe this is the Guggenheim army. That they're just they want to say that belongs in our museum.
So yeah, they've gotten wind of the plot, but they have it backwards. They think
it's real.
They think that this guy hired her to find the painting and he's going to destroy it because he wants this mythical map on the behind it that doesn't exist.
Right.
They don't realize that there is something behind it and she forged what's on top. Yeah. So they're trying to save the forgery thinking it's real.
Oh, it would even be interesting to have all of them there. So that really starts things out. So she's there to meet the people who commissioned the painting. Then the second group shows up, also criminal, evil thing, to be no, we want that because it's got the thing on the back of it. We've read the stories. We know it's back there. And then you start to get maybe she can work a better deal out of this. And that's when the Guggenheims show up, which non-negotiable. Everybody's going to die. All we want is the painting. And so then that's when the chase.
That would be hilarious if the hardcore art nerds are the most dangerous ones.
Yes, exactly. I love that. I love that idea. I love that there is these guys are out there patrolling around, mercilessly acquiring art.
I'm trying to think of
for the collection.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a slang name that they could call those guys to be oh crap, the whatevers are here.
Right.
That immediately is going to strike fear, even though it literally is just saying the art geeks are here.
Yeah, exactly. What is it? What's a pithier thing than art cop?
Oh yeah, because they're like art vigilantes.
Right.
Yeah. Oh boy, I'd have to sit and think about it for a while. I think to come up with something.
Snob, I think would come out. But I can't.
But yeah, that could be interesting. So there's now 3 different.
Right.
Parties.
And then so that's when obviously the literal chase starts, is that she's got to get out of there.
Yeah. because the jig is up now.
Jumping from vehicle to vehicle, working your way through, and then we get to the end. Obviously, if this was a movie, then that's when she like pull that hat off and like her hair would float down.
Yeah,
like, oh, it wasn't like, you know.
And it could. What if even this is like, it's even higher stakes at the beginning, because if she can pull off this deal, it's like her last one, and then she can use what she makes off of this to like
get back into art school or
to have
show
the freedom
or whatever,
to have the freedom to be a full-time artist, essentially.
Yes. Oh yeah. Then both of us can.
Who can't relate to that?
Right. Exactly. To have finally to give up the okay. Yeah. She has to have a straight job and stuff too.
Oh yeah. Just some. Yeah, could that be where we work in the trope where she works at a tavern or something? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Or it has to be something soul crushing. It has to be something not necessarily bureaucratic, but like that requires no personality, no artistic thing.
Complete dead end.
Yes, it's just pulling a lever. It's punching a thing.
That could be interesting. If what if it's like some ironic thing, like she has to pull a lever in like a factory that makes the pigments for paints.
Oh yeah. So she's like, oh, I'm this close.
Yeah. So she makes the pigments, but she can't actually.
Yeah. But she's like it has to wear all the covering, but she's like stirring the big pots of all of them and then putting them into the containers and just watching them go out.
Yeah. To other artists.
She can't. Yeah.
And like, even like maybe they,
or like you see like her digging in the dumpster and getting all like the leftovers. And that's how she gets her stuff.
There could even be some like, just going with the theme of like the hierarchies in the world. Maybe there's like there's the poor person bottom of the barrel paints. There's like the middle class paints, and then there's like the high end paints that have some of those power gems crushed up in the pigments.
Yeah, and they last forever.
Yeah, and their colors are like otherworldly incredible.
Yeah, and like the other ones like flake away. Like the small ones you do only last because of the pollution or whatever the environment. Like you can do this amazing painting, which she does, and then within a couple of days it all like falls off, like literally just like falls to the ground, leaving just the blank canvas again, and you kind of go, okay,
right, back to
like
the
so that's the thing. So she wants to make her mark, literally make her mark by doing something that will last forever.
Yeah.
And so and so then everything is decorated. So like all of the people's vehicles, all their things are decorated with this amazing color palettes. While everyone down there is all gray and black and stuff too, because of the paints they have.
That could be interesting. So where only lasting color can come from paint that uses those gem infused pigments. Yeah. So only the rich can afford them.
Right. Yeah. So everything. So even in the like social strata wise, everything is grays and browns, and it gets more colorful as you go up.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could be interesting where even with,
and that's like pigeons to dragons.
Right, exactly.
Gray, it's a color.
Yeah, maybe the dragons are like red and gold and sparkling white and things.
Right.
And the pigeons are all
and
gray.
Artists, they pay artists to do them, to design all of the stuff on them, because they're gonna stay that way forever. And
it could be like I'm thinking visually, like even like the upper crust artists have figured out ways to make those canvases almost have like a 3-dimensional effect because of the effect of the gems, and where it's becoming more than just a painting. So it ends up doing
you could have like trail, almost like fireworky trails.
Yeah, because if you have magical energy like laced through it, then you could even have people that like what they do is figure out creative new ways to use the paints and things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can have different. You can have like because these also are celebrities. So like you got your ship designed by, whatever the high end artist of that thing. Oh, this one does other stuff with what we call holograms. Basically, like it looks like they're floating above. But this one actually does stuff with like it looks like it's invisible.
What if she also has
She wants to be one of those.
Yeah, or what if she has like one or even more, like she has a theory that's like a revolutionary thing you can do with it, but she's never been able to test it because she can't get her hands on the paints. So that's one of the things that's been out of her reach, is this one thing that if she could just get the opportunity, she could like change something in the art world or the way that they understand the paints or whatever. And it's even just like she tells her theory to people and they laugh her out of the room. But it could be a fun thing to where like that's a personal accomplishment for her, where she ends up towards the end getting the chance to test it and ends up being right. And you could have it be either one. just like a nice personal character payoff, or you could have it factor into how she ends up winning the whole, like the plot in the end, or it could be both.
Like, I think we've got a good structure. I really want to know sort of where she goes from here.
Yeah, we have an interesting opening, and I think an interesting world.
Yeah, exactly. I like having art as important to the people, like it's built into the world.
Right. The society values it highly, which is a nice change.
It's a way from someone from the bottom to work their way up to be in there. Yeah, it'd be good.
Yeah. That was fun.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like this is what's fun. It's throwing around ideas back and forth. Writing can be so solitary, so it's nice to be able to do, especially this time, to be able to have somebody around to throw these ideas around with.
I think it was Delilah Dawson that described being a writer as like people are there to celebrate, as like being an old ship captain. Like people are there to celebrate when you leave port and when you arrive in port, but you spend the majority of your time alone on the ocean.
Wow.
I thought really it was very astute.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I wanted to do here, is have a bit of a port of call where that we could all dock our ships and one thing, and share a pint at the tavern before we go back to the word mines, back on the ship.
Nice.
Alone.
I like it.
So hopefully everyone has had a good time here visiting for a short time.
I did.
Good. Yeah, I did too. So I'm glad you were here, and I'm glad that our listeners were here too. Well, the stories won't write themselves, so back into the world we must go. If you'd like to know more about Ryan Dalton, you can find him at ryandaltonwrites.com or at @RyanDalton on Twitter. His books are available at Amazon, but he'd prefer it if you'd order from your local bookstore if you can. Thank you for stopping by. If you're in this part of the world again, there will always be a seat for you at the table here at the Storywell. Right on, right away.